What up, everybody? This season, we've been seeing Marvin doing overtime when it comes to putting in that work, catching more bodies than there's been episodes so far this season. Leaving the question, will something finally catch up with Marvin, or will he continue to get away clean? Because the fact Marvin potentially has early Tile and his people, Stefano and his people, Unique's crew, the New Jersey mob, and maybe even Stefano's son-in-law, all coming for him in this season finale, there's a chance that he could get taken out. But at the same time, with all the kills that Marvin has this season, not to mention his history, there's also a chance that Marvin could get caught up with the law. Going back to season 1, Marvin got put on the police radar for the first time since he got out of prison several years prior. Tony Deep got caught with some weight and she started snitching on Marvin to get her charges dropped. Because of that, we saw Marvin getting arrested in the season 1 finale. But by the time season 2 started, Marvin was free and clear, and all he had to do was attend an anger management class because Tony skipped town and didn't testify. Around this time, we were getting our first introduction to the New Jersey Italian Mafia as Rock was trying to expand her business to Jersey. This is when Marvin connected with Marco Baselli to take care of his rat problem in Marco's neck of the woods. But after Marco got killed doing this job, it caused a conflict between Sal and Rock because Rock wouldn't hand over Marvin. Because of that, the Italians blew up Rock's entire operation at the end of season 2, leaving a whole mess and getting the feds involved looking into what happened. Around this time, we were introduced to the leader of the Queensboro section of the Italian mob, Stefano Marchetti, because Sal went to Stefano before going after Rock's operation because it was in his territory. And because of the mess that was left after Sal's people attacked Rock's operation, this caused the feds to start looking closer into Stefano. By the beginning of season 3, right after these attacks, Stefano told Sal that he got it from a good source, that several of his spots were bugged. Then after Sal's death, Unique stepped to Stefano looking for that horse connect. And after Unique went missing, Rock stepped to Stefano to continue what Unique had started. This is when the feds started looking into Marvin Thomas as a person of interest who was potentially running the season 2 operation. They were able to connect Marvin to Marco through Tony Deep. And season 3 concluded with Rock smoking Howard to try to pin everything on him and Ronnie to get the attention away from Marvin. The beginning of season 4, it seemed like that plan might have worked because the police chief announced that the feds were closing their investigation and they were pinning everything on foreign nationals. But even though they technically closed their investigation, they were still watching Stefano's every move. And Stefano knows this. This is why he's operating out of the restaurant instead of the fish shop. But at the beginning of season 2, Andre Barnes told Rock that his connection at the FBI said that both Rock and Marvin had been seen meeting with Stefano separately. And even though we really haven't seen the feds in season 2, we know they're moving from behind the scenes. And after Marvin was spotted with Stefano, we know he has to still be a person of interest for them. I think they might have moved their investigation out of the NYPD offices after the whole situation with Howard, maybe not knowing who they could trust at the NYPD. In addition to that, in episode 9, we saw Mara on the screen for the first time in a few episodes, and she was telling Jukebox about how Detective Garcia was looking into what happened to her husband, Aaron. Mara said she mentioned to Detective Garcia that Jukebox was with her one of the times Aaron laid his hands on her. Keep it in mind that the first time Mara met with Jukebox, she was telling Jukebox that the cops were saying it was a robbery. But now it seems like since Detective Garcia is involved, they're looking more into it. Also keep in mind, the first time Jukebox met with Mara, she asked Jukebox if she had anything to do with it. So I have to ask the question, is Mara working with the cops, possibly even wearing a wire? Because her stories aren't adding up, and I made a video a few weeks ago that Jukebox's next body might be Mara because of that. And heading into the finale, I definitely think it's a possibility. But also keep in mind that Marvin was cut when all this was going down and left the knife behind at the crime scene. And I know it's the 90s, but Marvin's blood was left on that knife, and I do think DNA testing was available in the 90s. There's also Marvin's most recent bodies from episode 9, Amber's foster parents. Marvin showed up at these people's house in the middle of the day where plenty of witnesses could have potentially saw him. Not to mention he told Amber to lie about who the shooter was. I definitely think she'll try to look out for her Uncle Marvin. But at the same time, it reminds me a little bit of when Tariq thought about getting Yaz to take the stand for him during his trial. But when he saw that Yaz couldn't handle Cross, he said that he's not putting her on the stand. The same thing applies to this situation. Amber might try to lie, but she might not be able to answer all the questions to keep this away from Marvin. Keeping in mind that Marvin also showed up to Amber's school and paid one of the teachers to get her address. That was also the second time he showed up at her school, and the first time there was a woman asking who he was. So there's a lot going on with Marvin that could get him caught up with law enforcement right now. And we know these things weren't written into the show to fill time, that they will come back into play at some point. But speaking of things that would come back into play at some point, just a couple episodes ago, we saw Marvin robbing Quan before taking him out. And during this robbery, we saw Marvin get a bag full of diamonds. And like I said, I don't think those diamonds were shown for no reason. I think they'll come back into play for a specific purpose. After that episode aired, I talked about how it reminded me of Ace from Paid in Full, and how he was able to make a deposit on his new life once he got out the game from a diamond that he received earlier in the movie. Then there was also the Blue Diamond Ring from Power Book 2 that played a key part in the storyline and also came back into play even after the fact by bringing Noma onto the scene to retrieve that diamond. I have no idea what those diamonds that Marvin stole was worth, but since Quan was keeping them in his safe like that, I'm guessing at least 100 bands apiece. So with things becoming increasingly hot for Marvin on the south side, and in New York in general, and since Marvin's already been inside before and doesn't want to go back, that's why he takes snitches as serious as he does. It might be time for Marvin to take those diamonds and leave New York for good to start a new life. And because there's a possibility that Marvin could be a wanted fugitive, he might also have to change his identity. And if this happens, I think the most likely landing spot for Marvin would be Washington, D.C., because that's where Jukebox ended up also moving when she was older to become a cop. This is also where Kanan was always going in OG power even after Jukebox's death. Because of that, I think there's a good chance that Marvin could still be alive in DC on the current power timeline. There's also the possibility he could leave town and lay low for a while after changing his name, then return to New York once things cool down and nobody's thinking about him. And there's also Virginia Beach, where Kanan went at the end of season 1 when things got hot for him on the south side. And this could also be where Marvin goes. And there you have it. Marvin goes on the run and starts over somewhere under a new identity with the diamonds that he stole from Quan. Leave your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments.